and I am a cutter, about spacing, timing, and shape of cuts, and the relationship of all those things to each other, because they all affect one another. Einstein's theory of relativity actually applies to Frisbee, who knew? Spacing and timing are very much related to one another. So we've all had situations on our own teams and on the teams of the people we coach where we see somebody make a deep cut from really far away, and we can't complete that pass, right? Or if we can, it's because of a Christmas miracle. But we can't build our offensive system around these one-off situations, right? So there are these concepts within cutting of spacing, timing, and shape that we need to be able to articulate to our players in a way that's very relatable to them. So sometimes the most basic way to convey that information is just using a little bit of that situation that I just mentioned, where you have, I would run really far away, have somebody stand and guard me, and then say, is my spacing good here to make any cut? And most people can identify, even at really low levels, no, the spacing is very bad. The key you'll want to do is convey what you think your team's ideal spacing looks like. Because it's that spacing and that team identity of spacing that will dictate the timing and shape of the cuts. So a lot of times what we'll see in modern American Ultimate is a preference for very shallow, oriented to the thrower cuts being initiated. So what this might look like is if that is my thrower, I may want to start cuts from, and let's just say he's forced backhand in this situation for your own visualization. I may want to start a deep cut from this depth, right? I may even want to start it from more shallow, but the farther I get away, the less desirable we have this, right? So the throw has to become faster, and it has to become, obviously it starts to become more challenging to deliver in the way that he wants to deliver. So what I mean with deciding this as a team is with American Ultimate right now, it's very vogue to want to threaten deep first to create opportunities to catch the disc under. Okay? So I want to start shallow, not because I want to catch the disc here, but because I want to drive out, make myself a viable option, and if for whatever reason I'm no longer a viable option, I start to plan to come under and get yards that are greater in number than when I first started my cuts, right? Some teams will prefer to start in a vertical stack. And if we start in a vertical stack and your offense is oriented around being the back of the stack, a lot of times this may be too far away for your team identity to be to initiate a deep cut, right? You may have to make an undercut, and then, after eating up some of these yards to make this a more completable pass before making that deep cut. So it's going to be on you, the coach, to identify what you want your spacing to look like, and that will affect your timing and the shapes that you choose to teach.
Yeah, one of the big things, again, it's offensive system-oriented stuff, right? We have to make sure everyone is understanding what we're doing, but I think the big thing, and I mess this up from time to time. Fortunately, I got great assistant coaches, so they'll cue me in. It happens on rings. Sometimes we forget to say it, but the why, the why behind it. It's great that your team knows you're going to set up shallow, right? But they need to know why you're doing that, right? And normally a detailed why is more helpful than, we're going to set up shallow so there's lots of deep space, right? But I like to give them a why and then also a little bit more depth in terms of we want a lot of deep space, right? And we can create a lot of deep space by setting up shallow because we have a lot of great deep receivers. And if we give ourselves great deep space with great deep receivers, we will be able to hopefully throw deep effectively more often. Or I might tell them that we have people who are athletic, but our best skill set is coming under, so we'll set up a lot of deep space so we can threaten it to generate unders, right? I like to give the what we're doing, the why we're doing, and then what our priority within that why is, right? Are we trying to attack deep? Are we trying to attack under? And what's our method for that, right? That's big, system, team-oriented stuff. For a little kind of individual cutter offense, and we'll talk about this with defense because it's just the inverse. Most of cutting is a commitment battle and a battle of hips, right? We're trying to attack a hip and win a hip. Were you going to jump into shape cutting? Or
No. I was going to go into shape.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe right after this.
Yeah.
So Goose is going to talk about shape cutting, right? And it transitions pretty well after this, right? But I just wanted to make sure, a lot of times when we're teaching individuals how to cut, we need to teach them what success looks like and what they're trying to generate from their defender. Obviously, it's nice to have a plan in mind when you're going into your cut, but sometimes the easiest plan is just knowing that you're going to try to attack a hip, because most defenders will do one of two things. They'll either play you with what we call parallel hips or neutral hips, or they'll play you with hips that are facing a certain direction, kind of like angled hips or perpendicular. In terms of if Goose is worried about me going deep here, I doubt he is, but if he was to be, right, he would play behind me and force me underneath, right? As a cutter, I can already tell that I'm being given something there, right? So the hips are very obvious. The weak point in this situation is obviously his hips are facing this way. So if I wanted to attack a hip, because getting people to turn hips is good if I can't just run under and get this for free, it's clear here that this hip here is the weak hip, because it's going to have to turn the greatest amount, okay? If he's playing me with neutral hips, it becomes less clear where the weak hip is, right? The good news is you get to kind of create the weak hip as the cutter, because both are equally in the same position right now. So in those situations, we just have to identify our cutters, and this is where the priorities from earlier are helpful. If they know we're trying to set up undercuts, they can choose how they want to attack hips, right? And I generally want to attack the opposite hip of the direction I want to go. So if I want to go out, a lot of times towards the disc, a lot of times I'll attack this outside hip because I want that hip turn to be opposite of where I want to go, right? There's lots of different ways you can do that, right? You can do with just what I reference as a bull cut, B-U-L-L, like a horned animal, where you just run straight at them, right? And a lot of times I'll pick the hip that I want to slightly run straight at, and it'll get it to slightly turn, and a lot of times that's all I need with already having established forward momentum. A lot of people just use what we call a commitment cut. Similar idea, it's where we come out here, we reduce this lateral cushion a little bit, and we commit, right? We turn our hips, right, and commit to this and want to take this primary option, and then can attack with full commitment the other way as a secondary option. Because most defenders that are talented defenders can commit to one of your cuts completely and deny that option. It's really hard for them to match commitment on two cuts, right? Especially since they are normally reacting and responding to you rather than they will be anticipating, but they can't really react until you have done something. So if I commit here, it forces a 100% commitment from Goose, which makes it really hard for him to commit fully enough on this change of direction to be able to deny my secondary option. Or maybe my primary option if we just consider the first one a setup. Okay, and then you'll also see lots of people do things like jump cuts, where you just come out here and it's just a little hop step, which kind of like talking with marking, what that does is a lot of times an athletic stance is what we have our defender in. Sometimes when we come out here and just do this little hop, we'll see an upright mirror effect, which is good because an upright defender is less prone to play great defense than an athletically standing defender. So when I come out here and do this little hop, it does two things. It creates that. It also creates a complete opportunity for me to explode off of the landing without him having any body language cue about where I'm going, right? If I'm running out here attacking this hip, he can kind of anticipate what's going to happen. If I run straight at his chest and then hop, right, he has no idea until I just choose off my plant foot, right? And we really like to reduce this cushion between him and I, right? Because that way, when I make this quick kind of agility-focused jump cut, he has the least amount of time to respond, right? He can respond pretty well from far away because he can just kind of cut off this angle. But if I really push this cushion down to a small window, it makes it very hard for him without initiating physical contact to dictate on defense. Yeah. That's kind of individual basics of cutting, and I think Goose wanted to talk about shape cutting a little bit.
Yeah. Shape cutting is very much involved with that sort of commitment. So let's just pretend that disc is held by a thrower. And in this situation, the thrower is being forced backhand. If I am going to just be in a wide open field, sometimes we talk about shape with our cutters because the angles they choose, just like when we're talking about buying ourselves throws by holding the disc in a particular position, we can buy ourselves particular cuts with our body position and the shape of our cut. So if I take my defender out here, and again, where am I being forced? Or where's the force? Backhand. So I'm cutting, the backhand huck isn't coming, then I can plant and come under and offer. I've made this commitment cut. Maybe, like Nut said, the first commitment cut was really well guarded, but the second commitment cut was pretty challenging to be well guarded. So I beat him here by enough to where I can offer to catch this and it's thrown to. Or maybe I'm offering, but the thrower's not comfortable with it because my defender is pretty close by. Even though I've physically sealed out my assignment, my thrower is not comfortable with delivering the disc. Well, if Nut is with me all along and we get to about this range, what I want to do is maximize the shapes that I have available to me to still offer myself as a receiver. So I offered straight out. I offered here with my body between my defender and the disc, hoping to get it. But if I don't get it, I have another opportunity here, and it's back toward the midline of the field. And at this point, I have a physical advantage, spacing-wise, to my assignment, right? He's pushed out wide of the thrower. I can push him out as wide as I really want. I'm not going to literally push him out wide, but we can teach our players to be cognizant of not cutting directly at the disc, but cutting wide of the disc so that I can have this physical space advantage to come in and get the disc in the middle of the field for what we sometimes call that soft break. So you can teach these shapes based upon different orientations of the field, different types of offenses, but teaching shape is super important, and I think it's one of the most overlooked things that for coaches with regard to cutting, because they spend a lot of time on spacing. They spend some time on timing, because they teach, like, when you hear the clap of the disc, you should be making a move for that person. These things are pretty commonly taught, but shape I find to be very rarely taught, because if you have intelligent receivers buying themselves opportunities on the field, they're going to catch the disc more often. And if you're getting the disc to your cutters or your receivers more often, you're probably getting more yards in a piece than it's just moving between the handlers the whole time.
Yeah, one little thing to add, right? I say it often to a lot of the people I coach, but to be good, you should always have at least one option available to you on offense. If you want to be better than good, right, you should have two, and if you want to be very, very good, you should create three options always as an offensive player, right? And that's kind of what Goose just did there, right? He gave himself not only a deep option, but he gave himself an under option, as well as this lateral under/break option, right? Which gives not only the cutter three options in how he's going to get separation from his individual matchup, but it also gives the thrower three options.